Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for coming along for a webinar on hill, mountain and trail running. Sorry, I will turn that off. I don't know what it is. Yeah, just a few housekeeping before we get on with the session. If you're happy, we're going to be recording this. So if anybody has any objections, please put it in the chat. And any questions, please put them in the chat as we go along, because we're not going to answer questions during the webinar. We're going to answer all the questions at the end. So if you've got anything, please put it in the chat and we'll get back to you. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Right, hopefully you can all see the screen. Can you give me a thumbs up, Jason? Yeah, Andy, that's great. And okay. So just a quick introduction as to what we're going to cover today. We're going to give a quick background on the difference between hill, trail and mountain, the international versus the domestic scene, skills required for hill, mountain and trail running, Pacific training. Andy Douglas is going to give us a few questions and answers as to his journey from an endurance athlete to becoming a GB mountain runner, a very consistent GB mountain runner, the competition year, then international opportunities. So, right, so as a lot of you will know, hill running in Scotland is on rough, rugged terrain. There's some races you have paths, other races you're just running through heather and whatever is on the hill. But the World Athletics definitions is quite interesting, is mountain running and trail running. The World Athletics kind of encompass as one discipline, whereas as we know, mountain running, hill running, trail running, it's all very different. So mountain running is literally what we would call hill running in the UK, but it's in mountains that are significantly higher than a lot of the ones we have here. And it's a sport that takes place mainly off-road on mountainous terrain, but can use surface roads if there's significant elevation gains. So mountain running is a combination of running, jogging and walking depending on the trail steepness. And mountain running races internationally are traditionally defined into uphill and up and down races. In the UK, we have very, very few uphill races, so we traditionally have up and down races. And trail running is again a type of running that takes place on outdoor trails, often in mountainous terrain, and often includes significant ascents and descents. And trail races have no limit on distance or altitude loss or gain. And fell running, I've just defined as what nutters do in the UK, because a lot of people see fell running, Carnethy 5, for example, or the Ben, see a very steep hill, very rough descent, and assume that that is what hill and fell running is, but it's not. A lot of races in the UK are user-friendly on nice surfaces. In the last few years, trail running is the biggest growing discipline in athletics, with thousands of people are taking to the trails. And it's basically after the introduction of the UTMB, the 100-mile race around the Mont Blanc Massif, trail running has become really popular, and there's more countries trail running now than what do mountain running, because trail races you can do in mountainous terrain. In the UK, trail running you associate with lower level races like the West Highland Way on good trails, but not over the steeper stuff that the fell runners do. So just to show how popular mountain running has become and trail running in the last few years. The last World Championship was in Innsbruck in 2023. And the World Championship had 1,200 athletes from 67 countries. And these are all guesses they reckon that 50,000 people watched it. The economic impact was £7.7 million. And the event media, which was really good on this World Championship, reached over 106 million people, creating lots of media revenue. So you can see from those stats alone that mountain and trail running is on the up, and it does get a wide audience. So there's, within the sport of mountain and hill running, there's lots of disciplines. So traditionally in the UK, you'll have the up and down races on rough terrain, whereas on the world or European circuit, you have uphill only races. These are really common in Germanic countries who don't like running downhill so much. And now in the modern era, uphill races would be traditionally over, say, 10K with 900 meters climb. You would roughly climb 100 meters within every kilometer distance. But now we've had the introduction in the last few years of vertical Ks, which the title says it all. It's a kilometre climb, 1,000-metre climb, but it's short, sharp. So these races will be 3 or 4K, and the gradients are more akin to what we would see in the UK. And you get the classic up and down races, which again, they're not as steep as in the UK, and in the international European races, the classic up and down races are much more user-friendly surfaces than what they are in the UK. They're normally on trails. And if there are any technical bits, they're very short, they're not prolonged. In the world mountain running champs, we get a short trail, which is around 40 to 45K, and a long trail, which is around 85K, which is ultra. And then you get the disciplines like the UTMB, Tour de Monte Rosa, which are ultra trail races, which are 100 miles plus Western States, or the 100-mile races in the UK, in America. So there's loads of races that are ultra trail races on well-worn trails throughout the world, and a lot of them are really famous. And we also get stage races like the Transalpine race, where you're crossing the Alps for 8 days, and each night, you're doing 30, 40K a day, then you'll rest and race the following day. And I've put finally the domestic scene, because the domestic scene in Britain, in Scotland, is very different from England, which is very different from Wales. It varies depending where in the UK you're based as to the type of terrain you're going to race on. So just summarising, if you're looking to transition from cross country to hill and trail, the first stepping stone is probably doing domestic races in the UK. But if you've got more cash, you can try the uphill only races in Europe. And the terrain is a mixture. A lot of races will be boggy. They'll have heather. Other races will have big paths, rocky paths, scree slopes. So it's really good that if you want to transition and you decide to try out a few races, to contact the race organizer and find out what the terrain is, because I call the introduction races user-friendly races, and there's a lot of races on Wednesday nights that are short, but they're on good paths, small hills, and they can give you a taste of climbing and descending, because not everybody likes descending. But if you're a good climber and you can't descend technically, but you like descending on fast runnable paths, there's plenty of those options in the UK as well. In Britain, we have the longer races. You're just given checkpoints and you have to navigate from A to B. and some of the shorter races are flagged, and you just follow a flagged route across the hillside. We also, for safety reasons, because obviously the competition calendar is summer, spring, autumn heavy, because in the winter conditions can be foul, but we always ask people to carry compulsory kit. So for safety reasons, you have to take waterproof top and bottoms, hat and gloves, and the longer races you're required to carry food and also a map and compass. So at the moment, we still use traditional navigation, but with times changing, more people are asking if they can use a GPS and their phone to navigate. And in the UK, we to explain races, the distances, we put them into categories. So you'll have a short race, a medium race, or a long race. The short races are generally under 45 minutes. A medium race is 45 minutes to 2 hours, and then a long race is 2 hours plus. But within each category, we'll call it SM or long or L, and they're also categorized as the amount of tarmac path in a race. So a category A race will be on rough, rocky, real hillside. A category B race will be a mixture of good trails and a wee bit of tarmac, and a category C race would basically be a very large percentage of it is on road, hard trail, say a forest road, and has less climb per kilometre as well. So if you're looking to try out a few races, then category A long is not the race to start on, but short A or short B and C, that's a really good starting point, because it's not going to be technical terrain. And in all the domestic hill races, you're self-sufficient and there's no feed stations. Sorry, that didn't go quite as I planned. So trail races, international, I put international versus domestic trail races because we see trail running completely different in the UK to what you would see internationally. Internationally, in Europe, most of the trail races are on mountainous terrain, and there's a lot of elevation gain and a lot of descent, whereas in the UK, the domestic trail races tend to be the West Highland Way, the long distance walking paths, and obviously the shorter 10K races, but they have very little elevation gain, because what you would consider as a international trail race or a trail race in Europe, one of the classic long races, we would just call a hill race here. So historically, mountain running, trail races, a lot of the trail races were called mountain races, but now we've kind of moved on and we're calling a lot of the mountain races trail races when they're longer. And the more extreme trail races are sky running. All these races are flagged and supported, so there'll be drink stations, there'll be no navigation hiccups, because there'll be good marking. So it's a really good introduction if you want to try mountain running and you're no good at navigation. These races are flagged and they show you where to go. And they're typically on well-formed paths and trails. The more technical courses is part of sky running, which would be down squeeze slopes, and more sky running is more akin to what we would do in the UK. There's the trail races in the international calendar kind of are from 25k upwards if you're doing the World Mountain Running Association races. So as I've already said, in the UK, the more mountainous the trail races, we just think of them as hill races. So I've just put a table there to explain the difference. The international races, navigation isn't required, they're flagged, but they'd always give you a GPX file so you can go and recce the route and see everything without relying on the markers, because obviously a lot of these races, like the UTMB, they go overnight, where navigation does become difficult. if you can't see the flag, so you can have it on your watch and you'll know which way to go. The entry fees for the international trail races are quite expensive. It's not a cheap discipline of athletics, but then if you look at all the infrastructure that goes within a lot of these races, you can see why the entry fees are expensive, whereas hill running in Scotland costs pennies. In the UK, our gradients are often steeper, and it's just the nature of our mountains, whereas in the Europe, the races tend to zigzag. Rather than going straight up a hill, you tend to do switchbacks, so it takes a lot longer to climb up to the same kind of heights. So if you're thinking about running and you've not done any hill running, there's a lot of skills that you need. You need speed. The leaders in mountain races are running sub 28 minutes 10k, or sub 32 minutes, 32 and a half minutes for the women. These are the kind of times that the winners of the World Mountain Running Champs are doing. So they are fast, and they're also very skillful in descending. So for climbing, you need a lot of leg strength in your calves and glutes, whereas descending, it's very much something you get better at with practice, but you need really strong quads so you can take the impact. And if your quads aren't conditioned for descending, then when you do a descent and then you come to climb again, your quads will just give out because they're not used to the bashing that you get. Think of running a marathon and how heavy your quads get. That's if you do a good, fast, hard descent, your quads just get a lot of DOMs and micro tears. So they need to be strong and conditioned for descending. You need a strong core because it's not a uniform descent. It's terrain. It's very uneven. So you're always moving from one side to the other and always using your core. So the stronger the core is, the more reactive to the ground and the more momentum will carry you forward. And if you have a strong core, then that helps you with balance whilst descending, because you're going to use your arms for balance. You generally put your arms up high, but if you've got a good core, then that will take a lot of the impact when you're descending as well. Fast feet is essential for descending because you want your foot in contact with the ground for as little as possible. So if you're a descender and you're a hill striker, you're kind of braking with every footstep you take. Whereas if you go on your forefoot and tiptoe down the hill, then your feet are in contact with the ground for a minimum period of time, and you'll just fly down the hill much quicker. Good coordination. It's rough terrain. You never look where you're putting your feet. You're always looking 10, 15 meters ahead of you, because the brain actually computes where your feet are going to tread without you looking. You just see a line and follow that line, and your brain will automatically compute where you're putting your feet. You don't have to think about it. Whereas people that aren't so good and are nervy descenders, they will look at their feet, and again, they're losing time because they're braking with every footstep. So normally we just say on a deep step technical descent, just to disengage brain and let gravity take you, because it will, if you've got good coordination and you're agile, you can just leg it down the hill and use your arms for balance, and you will descend very quickly. Hill running, there's a lot of change of rhythm. So very often when it becomes steeper ground, you will go from a run to a walk, or if you're going from your cadence and your stride length changes all the time. So when you're running on a flatter stretch, you're going to have long stride length, whereas when you get to steeper ground, your stride length cuts down quite significantly. and you're tiptoeing up the hill. So a lot of fell runners, mountain runners, when it gets on steeper ground, they will do what is known as a hill, just walking. And it sounds wrong to walk, but when you bear in mind that some of the races, one of the world championships, the actual finish was up the ski piste that you would use in a downhill slalom. So it's really, really steep ground. And if you're walking and you're bent forward and you're using your arms to propel yourself forward, you can actually take a lot bigger steps than when you're running up the really steep ground. So you'll find some of the runners choose to walk the steep ground, whereas other runners will run it, will run up, and there won't be much difference in their speed. It's just the technique. You have to learn to walk quickly on steep ground. And you need the change rhythm to go from steep to faster running, from climbing to descending, from rocky to smooth. So if you're an athlete that doesn't like breaking their cadence, their rhythm, then it's really hard to actually run fast on the rougher ground you get in the trail running. Uphill only. Athletes that don't want to, there's a lot of people that don't like descending. As I said earlier, Germanic nations don't like descending, so they concentrate on the uphill only races. And literally any good endurance athlete with a high VO2 max should be successful with uphill only running if they've got the technique to run uphill, because as we know, a lot of good track cross country runners are very good on flatter terrain, but when they hit a gradient, they just haven't, their running style doesn't actually suit going uphill. So one of the important things about uphill running is you need a good speed to reach the base of the hill in good position, because if you reach the bottom of the hill and you're a very good climber, but if you haven't got the flat speed to actually get into the hill, then you have to work your way through the field. So to be successful, you actually need good speed to reach the bottom of the hill in a good place. When you're climbing, you always lean into the hill. You don't lean forward too far because that will crunch up your lungs, but you want to lean forward enough that you're leaning into the gradient and you use your arms. And arms become really important because as you're getting tired, you can use your arms and then your legs will respond by going faster. And you need to practice the transfer of running steep to fast, because in uphill only races, the gradient never stays the same. You've always got sections of steep, flat, slightly downhill, 1 in 10, then going to 1 in 5. It's always very, very variable. It's never one set gradient throughout the race. So it's really good to practice transfer of climbing on different gradients. Descending, these two pictures just demonstrate how different descending is in Britain to the international scene. A lot of races, the one with the British, it's rough, pathless terrain. This is probably a rougher race, which is the professional circuit. And it is just, you find a hill, you run to the top, you run back down. It's not marked, there's no paths. So that's very skilled to be able to descend fast on terrain like that because it's very rough. Whereas in the international scene, a lot of the descents are on really, really good paths that fine, they're rough, but you can let go, and it's about your speed descending, not your technical ability. But you do, in the next slide, get this. Andy can probably say if this was the same race lower down. He's nodding, so it is. But that is rougher. That's more technical skills needed there because you've got a steeper gradient, and it's also about foot placement. You want to be placing your feet on the smoothest track down, and that's quite loose. And if you're not confident descending, then people would go a lot slower. There's a lot of the countries, you kind of know when you're at competition, the countries like France, Italy, ourselves, Spain, we are good descenders, but if you came up behind a German or a Swiss person in a short, sharp hill race, you would probably be confident that you would be able to go past them on the descent, because some countries do a lot of up and downs, other countries don't do so much descending. So to be a good descender, you want to lean slightly forward into the hill, into the gradient, because if you lean back, you're going to be braking and you're more likely to land on your heels. And you need relaxed arms, because the arms are used for counterbalance. So if you look at the picture of Andy, his arms there are up a bit, and that is if he slips, the arms are going to use the counterbalance to automatically correct and keep you up. You want to keep relaxed, look forward, not at your feet, about 10 meters ahead. And as well, if you have tight hip flexors or tight lower back, you haven't got the same agility. So keeping your hip flexors loose means that you actually descend a lot better, because you're able to relax into the hill. Your quads take a bashing, so you definitely need to condition your quads by doing descents, and that will increase, the more descending you do, the more your quads will adapt and the stronger they'll get. On steep gradients, you need fast, short strides, and then you can lengthen your stride on gentler slopes. As I've already said, midfoot landing. And the thing, if you're new to the sport, is you practice on user-friendly gradients. So find your local hill, something like, if you're in Livingston, Decmont Law. It's not very steep, but the gradient is lovely and gradual, and you can do downhill reps. And then as you get used to running downhill, you can then move on to a steeper, more technical ground to improve your descending, and fast feet on a ladder. So that really improves coordination and hopefully your descending. The only way really to become a good descender is to actually practice it. Some people, especially if you've come from mountain biking, you can see the line, you have the no fear, and most people that have come from mountain biking descending, they're really, really good, because they can see the line and they've got no fear. Whereas people that haven't come from a mountain background, as in mountain walking or a traditional athletics background, they normally take a wee bit longer to get confident on the descents. So specific training, any mountain hill runner, you're training as any other endurance athlete, with more emphasis on the hills and trails. So like any other discipline, if you're a track runner, you do more track, you're just more specific on the kind of trails and hills that you're going to be competing on. So an important aspect of hill running and trail running is the profiles of races vary significantly. So if you're aiming for a race, I'm just going to go here, you can see you want to look at the profile of the race you're doing when you're planning, in the planning stage of your training, because the uphill only race, you can see it's just a slog uphill, whereas an up and down race, you're doing this one, 2 climbs up and down. So you want to condition your body to climb, descend fast, run fast on the flat, then climb, then descend again. So if you don't practice the switch over from descending to fast to climb in your sessions, then when it comes to the race, you do the first descent. And if you've gone too hard, you really, really struggle on the second descent. And in trail races, it gets a lot more complicated. So you want to see how many climbs and descents, and if there's a lot of climbs and descents, these are the profiles for the world champs this year, then you want to condition your body to doing lots of ups and downs. And if there's a long climb at the start, like in this one, then you need to do a long climb before you do a long descent, before you do a shorter climb. It's studying the profile and looking at what the race is really important to target the training for the event you want to peak at. So if you're, so I've given examples there of how the distance, the profile of races changes, and if for your race you've got a mile flat before you hit the hill, then sorry, that's my bread maker. Then you want to run the mile, run a flat rep before you hit a climb. And likewise, if the race starts that you're targeting starts with a descent and then goes into the climb, you want to do reps where you're descending before you climb. So it's really important to look at what the race profile is like and then work backwards and design sessions with the profile in mind. A lot of the races in Europe, you have to be wary of the altitude and the climate, because unlike in Britain, we don't get any races at over 1,500 metres over the height of the Ben. A lot of the races in Europe will actually start at 1,500 metres. So if you haven't had the opportunity to go to altitude, you need to be aware that you need to start slower and think about how the altitude is going to affect you, and climate as well, because trail running is all over the world. There's lots of races in jungles, in the desert, so you need to do heat acclimatization, use the sauna if you're going to be racing somewhere where it's adverse climate compared to what we've got down in the UK. And Pacific training for up and down, you always again look at the profile to see if it's going to be a single climb and descent, or if it's going to be laps or numerous ups and downs. And we would do as well for the uphill only races internationally. They're probably going to take the lead men 35 to 40 minutes for the winning time. So you definitely want to get some good long climbs in that are going to take possibly longer than what your target race is. So running up Ben Lomond, the good trails, up the Munros is, although we've got small hills in the UK compared to Europe, a lot of our climbs will be pretty similar to a lot of the races, because a lot of their races, they are 8, 9, 1,000 meters of climbing. Okay, and that's me for now. And I'm just gonna, Andy, can you unmute? And we're just gonna do some questions, and I'm going to ask Andy some questions just to get his background on running and how he started mountain running and his successes. So when you started running, can you just give us background about when you started running and the success on other surfaces?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much for having me along. So yeah, my beginnings, yeah, all the way back in probably just at the end of primary school. I think I joined my first athletics club up in Caithness, and I think really, I was never a kind of talented kind of junior or anything like that. I used to have a lot of fun. I worked hard, albeit to not much success, but I really enjoyed it, and I took that on through into university, where I think I was still really just doing kind of shorter track races like 1,500, 3,000 meters, the odd kind of cross country. But again, primarily it was for enjoyment. Enjoy the social aspects of it. I enjoyed competing. I think by the end of university, I would maybe kind of describe myself as a kind of good club standard athlete. So for for men, that's maybe 32, 33 minutes, kind of type 10K, 10K times. And yeah, and then once I kind of came back from having a gap year away in New Zealand, where I really began to fall in love a bit with running, and I was probably got my, I think my half marathon time down to about a sub 70, which in the days before carbon shoes was actually not bad, was not a bad time for for someone. So yeah, I think then the first kind of couple of years after coming back, and then when I started working with Sophie as well, um, that was when I kind of made that, I'd say made that kind of transition from kind of good club level athlete to then um, international kind of Scottish fests on the roads, cross country, and I had a lot of fun with that, and yeah, really that takes it took me up to about 2014, which is when I kind of transitioned into the hills.
So what made you decide to try out hill and mountain running?
Yeah, so I think mentally I was very um fatigued and tired and frustrated. I think I think I got to the point where I felt I wasn't progressing, or I couldn't really see where I could kind of regress beyond. I guess a kind of bit of that kind of background to my kind of my big kind of goal at that time was to qualify for the marathon at the 2014 Commonwealth Games, and I think my kind of 10K half marathon times indicated that achieving the qualification time would be realistic. Um, I I just sustained a lot of injuries during the kind of marathon training process. So um, I kind of standard kind of stress fractures, muscle strains, just kind of those constant little kind of knockbacks. And the kind of couple of marathons I did end up making the start line to, I kind of really kind of underperformed and wasn't an enjoyable experience at all. So yeah, so I was just really in need of a completely different challenge, different goal, different type of training, everything needed to change. So that's, I had that kind of honest discussion with my coach Sophie, and I felt like I really wanted to give hill running a go. I think I just remember one run running up to the top of Shahali, and I think it was from my first ever Munro that I'd gone up, or certainly I'd run up anyway. And I just thought, this is amazing. Like, why would you not want to do this? Like, loads all the time. So I mean, it must have been a nice day. It wasn't obviously like rubbish and windy and rainy, but yeah, and I just thought like that's where I kind of got my inspiration from that, and yeah, the
Did
rest was
did
history.
you did you find it easy to transfer, and what skills did you need to learn?
Um, I think yeah, in terms of transferring I think the mental side was relatively easy because I just really enjoyed the different training then I was being introduced to. So although I maintained still the kind of 5K, 10K type kind of flat sessions to maintain my flat speed endurance in my training, I was also starting to do like hill repetitions, doing the kind of uphill, downhill continuous loops, um and then yeah, like like kind of you said in your previous slides, conditioning my legs to down hard running hard downhill, to then having to engage again and go back up. And I think in hill running a big thing is about being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, you have to get in that mindset that it's gonna hurt pretty much, uphill from the off, and especially if it's an up and down, from that downhill to that to going back uphill, yeah, it's gonna hurt like pretty much straight away. And it's just kind of accepting that, and finding your own rhythm, finding your own kind of headspace in order to cope with that. So um, yeah, and I think as well, I just it just opened up a different community to me. Like I found the hill running scene, certainly domestically, is a lot more. There's a lot more kind of camaraderie in it, and you know, you still get that kind of competitive kind of element, but it's not quite so intense, and you can you meet like really like nice like-minded people, and you just you have good crack like before and afterwards, and I felt like sometimes that's kind of missing in other disciplines in athletics.
What elements of your training did you need to change? Or you might not have changed anything. Well, as in when I say did you obviously started doing Hill Pacific, but did you lose anything that you were doing before?
um I mean, I was like I did a lot more kind of off-road training, but I think kind of incidentally, like I actually like my some of my best like road running results have came off the back of like t a couple of years of transitioning into hill running. So I actually found that kind of variation. I was getting injured a lot less. That was probably like the key point as well. I think you build up strength and resilience that you might not necessarily do by just like plodding the pavements, like, kind of day after day, training session after training session. So having that kind of variability actually like made me kind of physically a lot stronger and more resilient. And yeah, so but it's interesting when so you talked before about the different disciplines within hill running. So I'd say for like obviously for the up and down, that's trained by just doing the kind of continuous like up and down loops or hill reps where you go like kind of 5 minutes uphill, 2 minutes, 3 minutes steady downhill, and repeat. But obviously living in Edinburgh, you're not in easy access of the really big kind of mountains that you have out in the continent, and you can't just go and do a 1,000 meter climb in just one go. Um, so it's how do you kind of adapt to that within the kind of boundaries of the facilities that are available to you. So I'd sometimes I would go to the gym and do 45 minutes on the stair climber. Pretty grim, but it was a really good kind of model for like developing the your kind of uphill strength, your quad strength, and also kind of going on the treadmill and just cranking up uh, the height, the elevation on the treadmill and doing that. So um, yeah, I mean it's all about kind of being a bit adaptable in your training when it comes to preparing for the hills.
Your pathway into mountain running, where did you start? Did you start on uphill, up and down, longer races? What kind of races have you progressed from to?
So 2014 was yes, it was first year in it, and I knew relatively little, admittedly, about the kind of mountain running circuit, certainly internationally, but um, thanks in large part to my coach. So we got very well prepared for the British trials for the European Championships. So when back in the day when they used to have a European Championships and a World Championships in the same year, Europeans would be July, World Championships would be in September, and the Europeans was an up and down. So that was a little bit kind of easier for me to kind of to prepare for. So that kind of classic up and down was my first real kind of introduction into hill running, and then with the World Championships being an uphill only, I mean that was a big eye opener because that was the type of race that I'd not really ever done before, and um, notwithstanding you can't really do that kind of a trial when it used to be kind of 12K uphill. Um, in the championships when we did the trials, it was at Sedborough, there was a lot of flat running. There wasn't very much like actual like steep climbing. And then the championships were in Italy, and then it was like about 28, 30 degrees. So again, not really comparable in Sedborough. Um, but yeah, so it started off really, yeah, for the first few years of hill running, kind of classic distances, the uphill, up and down, uphill, the occasional VK, which I've never really kind of quite mastered or got much good at. And yeah, so kind of like 2018 was my first kind of Sears and Owls. So that was my kind of first long mountain race. So that's about kind of 31, 32 kilometers, 2000, was it 2,200 meters elevation gain, I think, on that one, something like that. Um, yeah, and then yeah, and then just kind of past few years I've started to dabble in a bit more kind of ultra trail, kind of a couple of 55K trail races. So that's going to be my journey.
Yeah. How do you find domestic races vary from the international scene?
Yeah, very different, very different. Um, I mean, a lot of the points you've touched on already, like in terms of like terrain, marked courses, climate, definitely being a big one. But just the actual kind of racing experience as well is very different. Like domestic is like quite kind of low key, which is really nice. You know, it's a great way to actually get introduced into hill running if you know if you're an athlete or if you're coaching an athlete um who's not done a hill race yet. Like the hill races in Scotland are really good because it is like just I say kind of super low key. It takes a little bit of the kind of pressure off. And as I said before as well, like just the people, the from not only like the kind of competitors, but the organizers, the marshals, everything is just it's always like really, yeah, really kind of friendly, really welcoming. And whereas the kind of international scene, it's maybe a bit more kind of say kind of professionally run, maybe a bit more kind of corporatey as well. Like they have big name sponsors at a lot of races. Um, a lot of people wearing their sponsored kit, etc. Just kind of wary of saying because as you just see a picture of me in my sponsored kit as well, so it's yeah, a bit contradictory, but yeah. So yeah, it's a different overall, just like yeah, a bit of a kind of different vibe, but it's a really nice mix, a really nice balance, I think.
What type of athlete do you think should try the international scene?
Oh goodness, what kind of athlete? I think I would just recommend it to like to anyone. I think I mean I just think um it's such a cool experience to go away somewhere different. Okay, even if you know, even if you're, we can all have like different kind of targets and different aims, and you know, some people be aiming for those international championship events. Some people might just want to go away and experience a mountain race in a different country, and I'd say those are all like really good. Really kind of excellent kind of aims to have because you know, it's all about the kind of experience and seeing different places, experiencing something that's a bit different from back home. I mean, if you just like kind of look at the picture that's on the screen, I mean, how like amazing is that for like a finishing line? You have like the it's a kind of UNESCO World Site. It's a drives in, and but yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. So I would say like just whatever level you're at and you want to want to challenge yourself in international races are definitely a place to go.
Right, thank you, Andy, for sharing that with us.
Thank you
And
so much.
Andy is available for questions at the end. Right, we'll just
Yes.
move on quickly. And there's just a quick summary of the domestic calendar. So as I said previously, there's very little happening during the winter months, and it's, as from this picture you can see, the reason very little happens is because our weather is so unpredictable, and if you organise a race in the winter, it's very likely to be cancelled. The biggest race early season this year was cancelled because one of the storms came in, the really bad storm, and so they couldn't actually put the infrastructure in on the Friday for the race on the Saturday. So in Scotland, we have a junior under 20 league, and this is designed, it's 8 races across the summer, and it's designed to introduce juniors to the discipline. So they're 5, 6, or shorter for the younger ages. They're not long races, they're on user-friendly hill, there's not technical ground. It's a really good introduction to any juniors that you have that want to try the discipline. And that league runs from April through to September. For the Scottish Athletics, we have district championships for hill, and we have a national championship for hill and trail. For the trail, we have a medium race, and which is this year is Crieff 10K, and an ultra race, which is the Ochil's Ultra in September. And for the British Championships for the hill, we have 2 individual long and short races. So this year, Stuccacoin in Scotland is the long British Championship race, and the short British Championship race is in Northern Ireland at the end of May. And for the trail British Championships, they have a short, medium and long, but long is actually the Ridgeway, which is about a 100-mile race, so they definitely mean long. And we also have hill, the UKA fell and hill relays, which are 6-person teams for the clubs, and that's at the end of the season in October. So the British Championship races this year, they're both in May, but they can be, for the hill running, they can be spread all over the year. It depends which races are nominated for the championship. And the same with the trail, the short races, Forest of Dean in end of March, and then the medium and long later on. In the medium is in Wales in June, and I'm not sure when the long one is. And the Scottish Hill Runners also do a championship series, which you have 6 races, and they're categorised as a long, short and medium race. So you have 2 of each race, and you have to do a long, short and medium race plus one other. And the Scottish Hill Runners also have a mid-week series, which is called the Bog and Burn. It's on Wednesday nights, mostly through the Central Belt, and that's a really good series to try out hill running. There's the midweek races will get 150, 250 runners. Demaya is a really good race at Stirling University to try out, and that one gets a big field as well. That'll get about 300 people. And then the hill runners also do the long classic series, which are all the races that are long, and it's a combination of 5 races within those series. And these races vary. There's one in the Trotternish, another in Glenshee, Pentlands, 2 breweries down by Peebles. So the races are spread far and wide, and some of them are very mountainous, like Arrochar Alps, and others are like the Pentlands, which are just very low, up and downy hills. Each year, Scotland, we have international opportunities where we select teams to go and compete in some of the World Cup series. At Snowdon International, we have a senior home international, for home countries international for athletes 20 and over, and also a British and Irish junior home international, which is for the under 20 and under 17 categories. And we also send a relay team in October to a race in Italy, which is short and sharp. So there's plenty going on internationally, and Scotland's actually really successful. We get a lot of athletes in the British team each year, and yeah, it is a discipline of athletics that Scotland's actually very successful with. This year, the International Youth Cup, which we send a team to of 4 athletes, male and 4 female, and it's always for athletes that are either 16 or 17 in the year of competition. And this year, unusually, it's an uphill only race, which should attract different athletes from ones that are normally interested, because a lot of athletes don't want to do the descending because that might affect their track season. An uphill only race isn't going to be detrimental to their legs. So hopefully we're going to get a lot of new faces interested in the Youth Cup later in the year. And I've just put this slide just demonstrates this is Slovakia, a typical alpine race where you'll get the profile. This is the International Cup. Then they draw the line of where the race goes around the mountain, and then you've got various pictures of this one. It's basically up a ski slope on a good track all the way. So that is really just to demonstrate what some of the uphill only races look like, and they all vary greatly depending on what country you are in and what mountains they have. As Andy was saying, that it used to be a case that for the World Championships, you'd have a World Mountain Running Championship and a European Running Championship in the same year. But now in odd years, we have the World and Mountain and Trail Running Championships. And this year, it's in September in Canfranc in Spain. And there are different disciplines. You have the junior up and down race, a senior uphill only, a senior up and down, and then a short trail and a long trail. So there used to be a separate World Trail Running Championships, and back in 2022, they've combined the trail and the World Championships, so all the disciplines are together, and it's a big showcase of mountain and trail running. And we also I've listed the trials just in case anybody's interested. The first trials, the end of May. They're all open races, so if anybody's interested, they can just send me an email and I can give you details on how to enter them. So the trail races, their trials are in May and June, and the mountain races, it's mid-August, because for the trail running we need to select teams a long way in advance, because the races are more akin to marathon training, where you're going to put in a big block of training before the actual championship. And the other European mountain and trail running is now called the European Off-Road Running Champs, and that's in even years. And next year, every year it's at the beginning of July, and next year it's in Slovenia. And again, that has both senior and junior uphill only, and an up and down race and a trail race. So there's a lot of opportunities there for representation. And then the final slide I've got is if you're looking for further information on international scene, you've got the Scottish Athletics International Handbook. The Scottish Hill Runners webpage gives a comprehensive list of all the hill races in Scotland, and that includes the Highland Games races. They've just collated every hill race in Scotland, is all on the webpage there. The Fell Runners Association is useful for hill and fell running is the same thing, but in England they call them fells rather than hills. And the Fell Runners Association gives you all the information about fell races in England and Wales. And then the Trail Runners Association will give you information about the trail running opportunities in the UK. And then you've also got internationally the World Mountain Running Association and the International Trail Running Association. And also you'll have the UTMB series and probably a lot of the big races you've all heard of. There's so many trail races now that it's quite hard to keep tabs of where they all are. yeah, and the final slide is just Sleoch in the Highlands. Just there used to be a hill race up here, but it's not in the calendar anymore. But hopefully it'll be returned because it's one of the iconic races, not races, mountains in the UK. Okay, I am going to stop sharing and thank you all very much for listening. If you've got any questions that you want to email me about competition opportunities or training, please feel free. It's just angela.mudge@scottishathletics.org.uk. And thank you, Andy, for answering those questions. Okay, so does anybody have any questions? No? Andy, do you want to answer that? What is your general split of, that was disappeared quickly.
Oh, what's your general split of training
Elevation to
elevation
flat.
versus flat? Um, oh goodness, good question. Probably more probably more flat just because of where I live in Edinburgh. Although given Edinburgh is quite a kind of hilly city, anyways. Um, uh, yeah, I can vary to be honest from week to week, from season to season, depending on what I'm training for. I would say there's always, no matter what kind of time of year, there's always I'd say a kind of significant degree of elevation in my training, because I'll try and do a hill kind of workout, a hill-based workout, yeah, at least kind of once a week. So yeah, but like I say, with I still like to kind of keep that 5K, 10K type speed endurance type work in my training. So that's still very prominent in my week to week training. So yeah, I wouldn't like to give a percentage. It's difficult to give a percentage split, but basically I do both. There we go.
No, we don't. You can, unfortunately, that there is a masters competition. There's a European off-road mountain running championships, which this year is in May, and it's in Sicily at the end of May. And there's also a World Masters mountain and trail running championships each year, which this year is again in Italy, but it's to the south of the Dolomites. And you just enter as an individual and you can't represent Scotland, you have to wear a British Masters vest. So unfortunately, we don't select teams to represent Scotland, and they've changed the rules in the last couple of years that you have to run in a GB vest rather than a Scottish vest. There's a mix. So some of the junior races, the question is, are the domestic junior races normally paired up with senior races? There's a couple of the junior races. There's Ilden and Cademore, which are paired up with the senior races. So the under 20, the under 17s will run with the seniors, whereas the younger ages will have Pacific courses. But the majority of the races are specifically for juniors. Yeah, so the first one, De Myatt and Lomond, the second one, they're just going to be for juniors. Andy, how
That
did it
was
feel?
that
Yeah,
was not a planted question. I don't know. I didn't pay for one to ask that. Yeah, it feels very nice. Yeah, no, it's yeah, it was pretty good. I think 10th one was actually quite good. Well, really, yeah, really special because that was quite a long-held one. So I think it's always particularly nice when it's a record that goes back to like the kind of 90s or something, and you're like, oh, it stood for like, years and years, and yeah, and you break it. But yeah, I say sometimes you can get quite lucky with the conditions, which was which was what happened. Thank you though.
So
I'm not answering that
I'm
next
laughing
one.
at Andy, not the next question.
But
How would
yeah.
you recommend we acquire the right level of navigation skills? There are navigation courses run throughout Scotland, so you can go on a navigation course with Scottish Mountaineering or your local council, but Scottish Hill Runners also organise a navigation course each year. I say each year, I don't think we've had it the last couple of years, but last year Jill Stevens organised one in Deeside, but that one was Women's Pacific. But if you're interested, email the Scottish Hill Runners, and if enough people are interested, then we can ask them to organise a navigation workshop again. And also, if you're in, several of the clubs organise their own as well, like the Oakles, Shettleston, Carnethy, they will organise days where they're teaching members to navigate. And another avenue is to speak to your local orienteering club, because they can teach you far better navigational skills than any of the hill runners do have. Yeah, but I can email, if you send me an email, I can put you in contact with some people that can help you there. Has anybody else got any questions? Okay, we'll call that a day. Thank you everybody for turning up, and I hope you have learned something today. And if you have any questions, please just get in touch. We're here to help. And if you want any guidance for younger athletes, then we're more than happy to show you the pathway for junior athletes into hill running. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.